When we look for something, we get it. Let me say that again. When we look for something, we get it. So if you are looking for problems, you are going to get problems. When you are looking for opportunities, you're going to get more opportunity. When you are looking for success, you are going to get more opportunities to be successful.
This is Becoming, the podcast for leaders to think differently with actionable tips in 30 minutes or less to claim your intuition, your influence, and your agency. And finally, get to the truth of what stands between you and who you are meant to become. Many of us believe that once we become that future self, then we will be happy, successful, and complete. This podcast exists to shine a light on the truth that the time is now and your future self can be who you become today. Let's dive in.
Welcome back to another episode of Becoming. Today's episode is the second part of our 8-part series, Addiction to Awakening. And today's addiction is to disorder and problems. So last week, we identified the mothership of all addictions, which is subscribing to victim consciousness. Right? That idea that things are happening to you or that you are being a victim with you. So today we're diving into the next addiction, which is the addiction to disorder and to problems. I want to start this episode the same way I did last episode, which is I want you to put on the glasses, the perception perspective as we start this episode together. That you are the problem, but you are also the solution. And as we dive into this concept today, this addiction, I want you to keep that in mind because this one is a doozy. At least it was for me. And as you see how this is showing up for you, it can be very easy to beat ourselves up. It can be easy to get in the weeds of regret, of criticism. And if you can put those glasses on, that you are the problem and the solution, it will change everything. So let's dive in. So this second addiction, disorder and problems, is a really fascinating one. If we look at humanity and how we're conditioned, we are amazing fixers. We are amazing at solving problems. Some of us better than others, right? Some of us want to plan in advance so we don't have problems, and others of us like to address problems in the moment, right? There's different types of us. But at the core, we are wired for problems. We are wired to seek out problems and solve them. So there's a perspective that I want you to have as we dive into this, and that perspective is that we're going to talk about how this addiction is showing up in the physical world. But I'm also going to bring in some concepts in the metaphysical world so that you can see energetically what's happening when you are focused on problems and disorder, how it's mirroring in your life, how it's showing up as a reflection in your life, okay? So for this particular addiction, I want to bring you back to what I touched on in last episode so that you can have that frame of reference. When there is a stimulus, we are designed to respond. When there is a problem, we are designed to respond and solve that problem. The problem is that we are looking for problems. And now I want to bring in the metaphysical side. When we look for something, we get it. Let me say that again. When we look for something, we get it. So if you are looking for problems, you are going to get problems. When you are looking for opportunities, you're going to get more opportunity. When you are looking for success, you are going to get more opportunities to be successful. When you are focused on what's not working, you are at that level of the problem. Einstein has a great quote. We can't solve a problem from the same level of consciousness that created it. We all have problems, right? There's probably some problems or challenges in your life currently that maybe are coming to mind right now. Maybe there are some problems that have been around longer than you care to admit they've been. What I want you to see is that you probably are trying to solve the problem at the same level of consciousness that created it, which is impossible to then solve it and have a different experience. And so I want you to think about your problems just for a moment and see, can you see that the things that haven't changed in your life is because you've tried to solve them from the same level of consciousness in which they were created? I know for me, that has been very true in my own life. In situations where I was experiencing the same thing, I saw very quickly that I was trying to go at it, not necessarily with the same strategies. Maybe I had some different strategies, but who I was being was at the level of the problem. In other words, I was trying to address it first from last episode's title, right? I was the victim of the problem. The problem was happening to me. So on some level, even if I tried to be conscious about it, I was starting from behind. And that's why these addictions stack, is because when we feel victim, we are at the level of the problem. The disorder in our lives, on some level, we believe that we're at the level of the problem. And so if you look at your life, you could probably see, yeah, I feel totally like a victim to this problem. And you could probably see that there's a focus on how to solve it from the level of the problem. And so with disorder and this addiction to problems, why do we do this? Why are we so focused on what isn't working? Well, for many of us, I know for me, it was an addiction to showing that I was worthy because I could solve complex problems. And so people would bring me in, my clients would bring me in when things were so dire. And I loved that dysfunction because I could come in and solve it because I was an expert based on my own journey, my own path of always obsessing about the problem. I could really solve complex problems because I was so used to where my focus had lied. And so for me, the way that this showed up was I would come home after a very successful day and I would sit down, put my feet up, relax. And the thoughts I would think would not be in celebration of what I had accomplished that day. My thoughts that I thought would not celebrate how much closer to the goal I was. My thoughts were in obsession on what I had not done today. My thoughts were in obsession of what I wasn't yet. And my thoughts were in obsession on lack of where I wasn't. This is the addiction to the problems. We are addicted to what isn't. And by being addicted to what isn't, we cannot be in full power to create what is and what we are meant to become. When we are focused on the problem, we perpetuate it. And this is where there is a beautiful opportunity for you to take these principles and bring them into energetics. If you look at your life, I know this was true for me, because I was always focused on problems. I was always focused on the gap. I would experience always a gap. No matter how much I achieved, there was always more, right? There was always that focus. Now, let's be clear. We want gaps in our lives because that means we're going somewhere, right? We have to keep closing those gaps on the pursuit of becoming. I want you to differentiate what I'm saying between the external world of becoming and the internal world of becoming. This conversation is about the internal world. If we are focused on the problems of where we're not yet internally, what that creates is it creates essentially a magnet. I want to give you some visual here. This magnet develops in you, and you move through the world focused on problems, right? Because you believe you're not enough, or you're the problem, or you are in lack in some way. And so the universe has to give you more problems to solve, because that's where your focus lies. And so the opportunity today, everyone, my fellow listeners, is to see where your focus is, first and foremost. Don't even worry so much about getting into, I'm addicted to problems, but just see the simple truth that even if it's not 24 hours a day, that you spend a portion of your day focused on what isn't. You spend a portion of your day focused on what's missing, what you don't have versus what you have. That on some level during 24 hours, you focus on lack in some way. Whether it's lack the goal, that you're not enough, you're not worthy, whatever the story is, that's not as important. What's important is for you to just notice that on some level, you have this belief, this focus, right? That on some level, your focus is spending precious time on problems. And so as you start to realize that this is where your focus is, I know for me, it was so overwhelming because it was like everywhere. It was everywhere I looked. I could see that even when good things happened, I brought it back to the problem. And what I started to realize was this was actually my attempt to become safe. So this is really fascinating, right? Is when I would focus on the problem, it was because I was trying to get ahead of things so that I would be safe. If you take this principle back to early humanity, we were running from tigers at that time, but what we've done is we haven't upgraded the approach, right? So back then it was like, there is a tiger chasing me. I need to prepare, right? I need to keep myself safe. But now, are we focusing on problems or what could go wrong to protect ourselves and be safe when it's inappropriate to have that focus? Ask yourself, because for me, it was very true and it was everywhere. I'll share a quick story. So when I first started as a real estate agent, I was 19 and just ferocious, ready to get out there and get clients and serve. And I would go into my broker's office multiple times a week, and I would play out different scenarios for my clients so that I could literally cross every single bridge before I got there so that I could have a plan. What this did, though, is my focus was on what could go wrong. So I wanted to prepare, right? Which is great in business, right? I'm representing one of the biggest purchases someone's going to make or sell. And I was trying to prepare, but what I didn't realize is that actually invited more disorder and problems into my experience, because that's where my focus lies. So now that, might sound like a silly story, but for me, that was so paramount to reflect back on and see that so innocently, right? I was going in to prepare. But what I was really doing was I was preparing for problems instead of preparing for bliss. I was preparing for problems instead of preparing for opportunity. I was preparing for problems instead of preparing for magic. And that is what I want to turn on its head with you all today, is this idea that if you can see you're addicted to the disorder and problems in your life, that on some level, that's safer for you, for us, than it is to create the magic. That awareness gives us space to make a new reality and make a new choice. So as always, I want to leave you with a few practical tips for you to take this and really integrate it. So at the end of the day, tip 1, for you to really do an upheaval of your focus on problems and what's wrong. At the end of the day, write down and focus on what went right. And commit to doing this for 30 days. 30 days, end your day with a recap of what went right. And what you're going to notice is that all of a sudden that magnet, that attractor factor, if you will, is going to start to shift, where you're going to see more magic because you're not focused on the problem. Number 2, do you find yourself more valuable when you get to fix problems? As I had shared in my example, that was something that was a driving force for me, right? It's like, ooh, I have a problem to fix, right? Something to solve. And reflect on this, but what if just as you are, that's enough? What if just as you are, that's enough? And going and solving complex problems for your clients, that's an amazing offering. Again, this is the distinction. We're talking about external results with your clients. If you go and help someone solve a problem, that is why they want to pay you, right? But what we're talking about is internally. How are you moving through the world, and are you preparing for problems? Because that's bringing in more of that into your life. And the last tip, how can you see that where your focus has led to more problems or disorder? Because focus is everything, right? It's like we can bring so much back to what we're focused on. And so remember, you are the problem and the solution, right? As we stack these addictions, you're going to see things really start to unwind. And I can't wait to hear how that goes for you. So please share with me. And like I said last episode, I'll create more content around maybe what you're going through so that can help support you even more. See you next week.
Are you experiencing change and breakthroughs as you listen to Becoming? If so, show us some love and hit the subscribe button, leave a review, and share an episode. I love bringing this content to you each week. And together, listener by listener, we can wake up the world. See you next week.